It is 2 in the morning. I have a baby that is not mine strapped to my chest. And I'm standing in the hallway of a penthouse in Seattle that belongs to 3 men who could snap me in half without breaking a sweat. This is fine. Everything is completely fine. The baby Seo Jun, 8 months old and the current center of my entire collapsing universe, shifts against my chest and makes a small sound. Not a cry, not yet. Just a warning. The kind of sound that says, I know you are panicking, and I would like you to know that your panic is inconvenient for me. My name is Yeon Hajin. I am 23 years old. I am an Omega who has been suppressing his scent since he was 17, who does not cry in public, who once held himself together through an entire graduate semester with nothing but black coffee and stubbornness after his mother died. I do not fall apart. Except right now, I am sitting cross-legged on the floor of my dead best friend's apartment and falling apart in spectacular fashion. Mireille left me a baby. Not metaphorically. Not in a be his godfather kind of way. My best friend Park Mireille, the most chaotic, brilliant, infuriating person I've ever loved, collapsed in the hospital 3 weeks ago at 26 years old. An undetected heart condition, the doctor said, as if those words were supposed to make any of this make sense. Her final instructions, notarized and witnessed and handed to me at her funeral, inside a sealed envelope like a grenade, said one thing. Give Seo Jun to his fathers. That was the whole sentence. No address, no names, no explanation for why. In 8 months of raising this baby alone, she never once told me who fathered him. Just give Seo Jun to his fathers, and a keycard with a downtown address that turned out to be the most aggressive residential tower I have ever stood in front of, while holding a car seat and the unhinged energy of a man one bad moment from screaming into traffic. The building directory, he had one name listed for the penthouse. Kang, I know that name. Every Omega in the Pacific Northwest knows that name. The Kang triplets Kang Siwan, Kang Jihoon, Kang Daehyun are the kind of alphas that people discuss in hushed voices and slightly unhinged admiration. Pack Kings. The Kang family has held dominance over the western seaboard for 3 generations, but these triplets consolidated it in a way their father never managed. Real estate, biotech, and something nobody talks about publicly, but everyone understands, involves the kind of power that does not show up on tax documents. They are 28 years old. They are terrifying. And they are, apparently, the reason there is a baby currently drooling on my shirt. Mireille, I loved you. I will be furious at you for the rest of my life. The keycard worked, which should have been my first warning that this was planned. That she had arranged for me to walk directly into the lion's den, and I stepped out into a space that smelled like cedar and something dark, like the air before a storm rolls off the water. Alpha scent. 3 layers of it. So dense it pressed against my skin like a hand. Here's the thing nobody tells you about grief. It breaks your body along with everything else. My suppressants had been failing for 2 weeks. I did not fully understand that until the elevator doors opened, and I felt my own scent spike the way it has not done since I was a teenager. Citrus and warm rain, and that frequency underneath that every unmated Omega carries. The one that says here, 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 to anyone built to hear it. 4 seconds. That was how long I had before Seo Jun woke up. He did not wake gently. He woke the way he does everything completely and loudly, his face crumpling, his voice filling the dark penthouse like an alarm in a cathedral. I was bouncing him immediately, whispering his name, pressing my lips to his temple, running through every trick 3 weeks of crash course parenthood had taught me, and I was crying. Not dramatically, just the quiet kind that happens when your body runs out of the energy needed to hold everything together. Park Mireille, I thought, swaying in the dark with her son against my chest. I hope wherever you are is beautiful, and I hope you know I am never forgiving you. I did not hear the doors open. What I heard was the air change, that specific shift that happens when an alpha moves with intent, the kind of presence that displaces a room rather than just entering it. My whole nervous system fired before my brain caught up. I spun around. 3 men stood at the end of the hallway, identical in the way triplets sometimes are, same jaw, same height, same sharp architecture of cheekbones designed specifically to cause emotional damage. But the differences landed immediately. The one on the left stood perfectly still, cataloging. The one in the middle had gone motionless, in a way that felt more dangerous than movement. The one on the right stepped forward, first, and something in his expression shifted into territory I had no name for. Seo Jun's crying stopped. The baby turned his head toward that man like a compass finding north, reached out one small hand, and something broke open in that man's face, something unguarded and total. The quiet wreckage of a person seeing something they did not know they had been missing. All three of them looked at the baby in my arms, and every single one of those powerful, storm-scented alpha kings went completely feral. Oh, I thought, with the calm of someone watching a natural disaster approach from a very short distance. This is going to be so much more complicated than I thought. None of them moved. That was the thing that got me. Three of the most powerful alphas on the western seaboard, men whose names made corporate boardrooms go quiet and rival packs reroute their territory lines, and they were standing at the end of that hallway, like Seo Jun's tiny outstretched hand had just short-circuited every single one of them. I used that moment to do a very quick, very practical assessment of my situation. 1. I was deep inside a private penthouse at 2 in the morning with a baby, a failing sense suppressant, and absolutely no exit strategy. 2. Said baby was currently making grabby hands at 3 alphas who had every legal and biological reason to take him from me without a single word of explanation. 3. My heart was doing something embarrassing and unnecessary in my chest, and I was choosing to blame that entirely on adrenaline, and not at all on the fact that the one on the right had a jaw that could cut glass and was looking at Seo Jun like he had just discovered gravity. Okay. 4. I was absolutely going to handle this. So, I said, my voice came out steadier than I deserved credit for. All 3 pairs of eyes shifted from the baby to me, and I want to be honest with you. That was not a comfortable experience. Being looked at by one alpha with full attention is enough to make most omegas step back. Being looked at by 3 simultaneously in the dark, with my suppressants doing absolutely nothing useful, felt like standing in the path of 3 separate oncoming trains. I did not step back. I am guessing, I continued, adjusting Seo Jun against my chest so he was facing them, because apparently he wanted a front row seat to my potential demise, that at least one of you knows why I'm here. And if that is the case, it would be incredibly helpful if that person could identify himself before I have a full medical event in your foyer. Silence. Then the one in the middle spoke. His voice was low and unhurried, the kind of voice that was not used to repeating itself. Who are you? Not a question, a demand dressed up as one. Yeon Hajun. I kept my chin level. Graduate student, former barista, current accidental parent figure, and the best friend of Park Mirai, who I am assuming at least one of you also knew. Something moved through all 3 of them at once, not visible on their faces, not obvious in their bodies, but I felt it. A shift in the air, a tightening. The way a room changes pressure before a storm actually hits. The one on the left closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. The one in the middle went very still. The one on the right, the one Seo Jun was still reaching for, turned his face slightly away. That 1 second of reaction told me everything I needed to know. They knew her. They had known her. And whatever Mirai had been to them, the news of her was not news they were prepared to receive in the middle of the night from a stranger with her son. I felt something crack open in my chest that had nothing to do with Omega biology and everything to do with recognizing grief on someone else's face. I still did not step back, but I softened my voice. Just slightly. She passed 3 weeks ago. Cardiac event. They said it was undetected since birth. I paused. Because there is a right way to deliver information like this, and I had learned it the hard way. She did not suffer. It was fast. The one on the right made a sound that was barely audible. I pretended I did not hear it, because he looked like the kind of man who would rather combust than be witnessed in a vulnerable moment by a stranger. Seo Jun made a small impatient noise and lunged forward with all the physics-defying determination of an 8-month-old who had decided on a destination. I tightened my grip on him automatically. He does that, I said. He has been doing it since we pulled up to your building, actually. I thought he smelled something. Apparently, that something was all 3 of you. The one on the left finally moved. He stepped forward into the light from the hallway fixture, and I got my first real look at him. Sharp eyes, careful, measured. The kind of face that was always calculating 2 steps ahead and had learned to keep that invisible. He looked at Seo Jun the way a man looks at a math problem he already knows the answer to but needs to verify. How old? He said. 8 months. His jaw shifted. He looked at his brothers. I watched the three of them have an entire conversation without a single word, just eye contact and the subtle architecture of expression that people develop when they have shared a face and a life since birth. Whatever they said to each other in that silence, it landed like a verdict. The one on the right looked back at Seo Jun, then at me. His eyes were dark, and there was something in them that I could not name yet, but that made the back of my neck warm in a way my suppressants had absolutely no answer for. Come inside, he said. It was not a question either. I looked at all three of them. I looked at the dark penthouse behind them, at the door I could not get back to without walking past all three of their considerable presences, at Seo Jun, who was now practically vibrating with the effort of reaching toward these men. Just so we are clear, I said, I am only coming inside because the baby wants to, not because any of you asked nicely, which, for the record, none of you did. The one on the left blinked. The one in the middle's mouth moved like it almost did something. The one on the right looked at me for one long, unreadable moment. Then he stepped aside to let me through. The penthouse was the kind of place that made you aware of your own financial situation in real time. I stepped inside and immediately clocked three things. The floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Seattle's skyline, all glittering water and bridge lights and the dark shape of Elliott Bay in the distance. The kind of furniture that did not have price tags because, if you needed to ask, you had already lost. And the scent, thicker now that I was fully inside it, cedar and storm, and something underneath that was warm in a way I was absolutely not going to think about. I thought about it anyway. Briefly, against my will. Seo Jun had gone completely quiet, his head swiveling slowly as he took in the space with the focused intensity of a tiny person encountering something his whole body recognized before his brain could process it. He made a soft sound, happy, settled, like something in him had just exhaled for the first time. I had been carrying this baby for 3 weeks. I knew all his sounds. That one was new. I did not let myself feel too much about that yet. The one on the right, the one who had stepped aside to let me in, moved past me toward the living area. Up close, he was even more inconvenient to look at. Broad shoulders, the kind of quiet physical authority that came not from trying, but from simply existing in a body, built the way his was. He turned on a lamp, and the room came up warm and gold, and I got a proper look at all three of them for the first time. They were beautiful in that specific way that felt almost aggressive, like the universe had allocated an unfair quantity of bone structure to one family, and called it a day. The one on the left, I realized, was watching me catalog all of this. His expression said he found it mildly interesting, the way a scientist finds a specimen mildly interesting. Not cold, exactly, just precise. Kang Siwon, he said, and pointed to himself. Then to the one on the right. Kang Daehyun. Then to the one in the middle, who had settled onto the arm of the sofa and was looking at Seo Jun with an expression that was doing complicated things. Kang Ji-hoon. Hajun, I said. You already have the last name, and this is Seo Jun. I adjusted the baby so they could see his face fully. Park Seo Jun, 8 months old. Currently very interested in all three of you, which I will admit is more than I expected from an 8-month-old with reasonable self-preservation instincts. Ji-hoon, the one in the middle, leaned forward slightly. His eyes moved over. Seo Jun's face with an intensity that was not aggressive but was deeply focused. Searching for something. Finding it. From the look that crossed his expression. His jaw tightened once and then released. Dae-hyun, on the right, had not looked away from the baby since we walked in. Can I? He started. He stopped himself, like he had remembered something. Like he was not sure he had the right to finish that sentence. Something about that restraint hit me somewhere unexpected. You can hold him, I said. He's clearly already decided about you. I am just the transportation at this point. The corner of Daehyun's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more honest than that. He crossed the room and held out his hands, and the way he did it, careful and open and waiting, meant Seo Jun lunged for him so fast, I nearly fumbled the transfer. But Daehyun caught him clean, one large hand supporting his back, and the moment that baby was settled against his chest, something happened in the room that I felt in my actual bones. Seo Jun grabbed a fistful of Daehyun's shirt and buried his face against his collarbone and just stayed there, like he had always known the shape of this person. Nobody spoke for a moment. I was not going to cry. I had already used my crying allocation for the evening, and I had a reputation to maintain with these strangers. Saiwan, the one I had already clocked as the tactical one, broke the silence. Mirai never told us she was pregnant. It was not an accusation. It was a fact being laid on the table for examination. She never told me who the fathers were, I said, equally flat. We are apparently both working from incomplete information. Fathers, Jihoon said. It was the first word he had spoken. His voice was lower than his brother's, rougher at the edges. Plural, I confirmed. I read Mirai's letter 4 times. She used the word fathers with an S. Another one of those wordless triplet. Conversations happened over my head. I let it. I was busy watching Seo Jun, who had tipped his head back, to look up at Daehyun's face with the absolute fearless curiosity of a baby who had already made his mind up about a person. Daehyun looked back down at him. Something in that man's face had gone completely open, in a way I suspected very few people ever got to see. My suppressants chose this precise moment to fail entirely. I felt it happen, a warmth rolling off my skin that I could not stop, my scent spiking sharp and sweet in the enclosed space, citrus and rain and everything underneath that I had been locking down since I was 17 years old. 1 second I was controlled. The next I was broadcasting on every frequency. All 3 of them went still. Siwon's eyes cut to me. Daehyun's head lifted. Jihoon, from the arm of the sofa, looked at me with an expression that was quiet and dark and absolutely focused. That, I said with tremendous dignity, is not what I intended. Nobody moved. And I mean nobody. The 3 of them had gone so still that the only sound in that entire penthouse was the quiet hum of the city 40 floors below us, and Seo Jun making small content noises against Daehyun's chest, completely unbothered by the social disaster his temporary guardian had just detonated in the middle of the room. Must be nice. To be 8 months old and have no concept of embarrassment? I was experiencing enough of it for both of us. Here is what I knew about omega scent spikes. They were involuntary. They happened under stress, grief, exhaustion, or biological proximity to a compatible alpha. They were not, under any interpretation, a declaration of interest. They were simply the body doing what bodies did when the chemistry got loud enough and the suppressants got tired enough. Here is what I also knew. 3 unmated alpha kings were currently in the same room as my unchecked scent, and the air had changed in a way that I could feel against my skin. Not threatening. That was the thing. It was not aggressive or predatory the way I had braced for. It was attentive, focused. The way a room feels when everyone in it suddenly becomes very aware of the same thing at the same time. I straightened my spine and looked Saiwon directly in the eye, because he was the one who looked most likely to handle direct eye contact without making it weird. I am on suppressants, I said clearly. They have been unreliable since Mirai passed. This is a grief response and a stress response, and it is not an invitation of any kind. I need you all to understand that before anyone does anything with their alpha biology, that we will both regret. Siwon looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Noted," in a tone that was so professionally neutral, it almost made me like him. Jihoon, from the sofa, tilted his head slightly. He had not stopped looking at me since the scent hit the room, and his expression was doing something that I could not fully decode. Not hunger, exactly. More like recognition. Like something in him had identified something in me, and was now quietly sitting with that information. That was somehow more unsettling than hunger would have been. Daehyun had turned slightly away, which I appreciated. His shoulders were set in a deliberate line, like a man talking himself down from something. His hand moved slowly across Seo Jun's back, rhythmic and steady, and I had the distinct impression he was using the baby as an anchor, as much as a comfort. "You said she gave you a key card," Siwon said, redirecting with the efficiency of someone who managed crises for a living. "In an envelope with the letter. Her lawyer gave it to me at the funeral. I reached into the diaper bag still hanging off my shoulder, dug past 2 diapers and a changing pad and what I was fairly certain was a petrified piece of puff snack, and produced the envelope. I held it out to him. Everything she left me is in there. The letter, the card, and a photograph. I do not know what the photograph means, but I have been looking at it for 3 weeks, and I think you might. Saiwan took it carefully. He did not open it immediately. He looked at it the way you look at something you know is going to cost you something before you let yourself pay the price. Ji-hoon stood up from the sofa arm and crossed to look over his brother's shoulder as Siwon finally opened the envelope and removed the photograph. I watched both their faces. Siwon went very quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. Ji-hoon closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When he opened them, they were darker than before. Dae-hyun spoke without turning around. Is that the one from Chicago? It was not a question. Yes, Siwon said. Dae-hyun nodded once, slowly, like a man accepting a sentence he had been expecting for a long time. I looked between the 3 of them. I'm going to need someone to explain what Chicago means, because I have been operating with basically no information for 3 weeks, and I am at the end of my patience with mystery. 2 years ago, Siwon said, still looking at the photograph, Mireille was in Chicago for a research conference. We were there closing a property acquisition. A mutual friend introduced us at a dinner, and she stayed for the weekend. He paused. His voice was even and careful, and gave away almost nothing except the very edges. We did not know she had gone home pregnant. She never contacted us. She would not have, I said, before I could decide whether to. All 3 of them looked at me. I exhaled. Mireille had a thing about not being anyone's obligation. She would rather eat glass than ask for help she did not think she had earned. If she found out she was pregnant and decided you did not need the complication, she would have handled it alone and convinced herself it was the right call. The silence after that was heavy and specific. That sounds like something I need to be angry about, Ji-hoon said quietly, but I cannot figure out who to be angry at. Join the club, I said. We have bad coffee and unresolved feelings. It is a terrible club, but the membership is free. Seo-jun chose that moment to make a sharp, demanding sound, reaching up to pat Dae-hyun's face with an open palm, leaving a small, damp handprint on his jaw. Dae-hyun looked down at him. Something in his expression cracked the rest of the way open. He needs to eat, I said, softer now. He's on solids, but he still takes a bottle at night. I have one in the bag. Dae-hyun turned to look at me fully for the first time since my scent had filled the room. His eyes were dark and direct and entirely too much to look at for longer than necessary. Show me, he said. I showed him, which meant I was standing in the kitchen of a penthouse that cost more per square foot than my entire graduate stipend at 2:30 in the morning, teaching a man who owned half of Seattle how to warm a bottle, while his 2 brothers sat at the kitchen island watching this unfold like it was the most interesting thing that had happened to them all year. It possibly was. I chose not to examine that too closely. Water temperature matters, I said, holding the bottle under the tap. Not hot, warm. You test it on your wrist, not your hand. The inside of the wrist. The skin is thinner there, so you get an accurate read. Dae-hyun was standing close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off him. Not close enough to be inappropriate, just close enough that my nervous system was filing a formal complaint about it every 3 seconds. Like this, I said, and demonstrated on my own wrist. If it feels comfortable, it is right. If you have to think about it, it is too hot. He watched my hands with the same focus he had given everything since I walked in. Then he reached past me to adjust the tap, and his forearm brushed my shoulder, and I absolutely did not react to that in any way worth reporting. Good, I said, handing him the bottle. Now you try. He tested it on his wrist, nodded once. I gestured to the chair at the kitchen island, the one closest to the window, where the city light came in softest. Sit there. Support his head. Keep the bottle tilted so there is no air at the nipple. He will tell you if something is wrong. How will he tell me? Dae-hyun said, settling into the chair with Seo-jun with a carefulness that was almost painful to witness. Loudly, I said. Trust me, you will know. The moment Dae-hyun offered the bottle, Seo-jun latched on with the focused dedication of a tiny person who had opinions about being kept waiting. The kitchen went quiet except for the small sounds of a baby eating, and Daehyun looked down at him with an expression that had gone somewhere entirely private. I turned away to give him that, busied myself with re-zipping the diaper bag. Saiwon was watching me from across the island. You have been doing this alone for 3 weeks. Correct. No family, no support. My mother passed 2 years ago. I have a cousin in Portland who offered to come, but she has a newborn of her own. I kept my voice practical. Mireille's parents are in Busan. They know about Seojun, but they are elderly and the travel is difficult, so yes, just me. You are a graduate student? Jihoon said. Also correct. What field? I looked at him. He was leaning forward with his elbows on the island, his chin resting on one hand. Watching me with that quiet, focused attention that I was starting to understand was simply how he existed in the world. Jihoon was the kind of man who listened to everything and said very little and probably knew exactly what you were going to say before you finished saying it. It was deeply inconvenient. Behavioral neuroscience, I said. Specifically, scent memory integration and post-traumatic omega recovery. I paused. Which is a sentence that has become personally relevant to me in the last 3 weeks, in ways I find professionally uncomfortable. Something shifted in Jihoon's expression. You study omega trauma responses. I study how scent memory affects neurological recovery in omegas after high-stress events. I looked at him steadily, which means I am fully aware of exactly what my own biology is doing right now and why, and I would like all 3 of you to know that awareness does not make it less annoying. Siwon made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. She researched us, he said to Jihoon. Not accusatory, just observational. I Googled you, I corrected, in the parking garage before I came upstairs, for approximately 45 seconds, which told me your names, your territory range, and that one of you was photographed leaving a charity gala in Portland last spring looking like you had never smiled voluntarily in your entire life. I looked between them. I did not have time for more thorough research. Which one? Jihoon said. You, I said. He did not look surprised. Fair. From the chair by the window, Daehyun said quietly, she used to talk about not wanting to owe anyone anything. The kitchen went still. He was still looking down at Seojun, his voice low and even, but the weight in it was unmistakable. The night we met. She said it like it was funny, like she was making a joke about her own personality. But she meant it. A pause. I should have pushed harder for her contact information. You could not have known, Siwon said. No, Daehyun agreed, but I thought about her. Afterward. He looked up then, directly at me, and his eyes were dark and honest in a way that hit somewhere behind my sternum. I thought about her for a long time. I had no sassy response to that. For possibly the first time all evening, I had nothing. Seojun finished the bottle and made a small sound of satisfaction, turning his face into Daehyun's chest. Daehyun shifted him up automatically, hand curved between his small shoulder blades, and the gesture was so natural it looked like memory. He needs to be burped, I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Pat his back gently, center of the spine. Daehyun did exactly that. Seojun burped with tremendous enthusiasm for someone his size. There he is, I said softly. And for just one unguarded second, all 4 of us were in the same quiet. And it did not feel like a crisis at all. Then, Jihoon looked at me and said, You are not leaving tonight. I stared at him. I am sorry, I said. Could you repeat that in a tone that sounds less like a verdict? Jihoon did not repeat it. He just looked at me with those quiet, dark eyes that had apparently been engineered specifically to make people feel like arguing was pointless. He was not aggressive about it. He was not even commanding about it in the obvious alpha way I had been half bracing for all evening. He was simply certain, the way gravity was certain, and he was waiting for me to catch up. I turned to Saiwon because Saiwon seemed like the one most likely to respond to logic. I appreciate the concern, genuinely. But I have an apartment in Capitol Hill, which is 20 minutes from here, and I am a grown adult Omega who has been managing his own life for 23 years without requiring anyone's permission to go home. Your suppressants failed, Siwon said. They are having a rough week. They will recover. You are broadcasting an unbonded Omega scent in the middle of the night in a city with 3 active rival pack territories within a 10-mile radius. He said it the way someone reads a weather report. Factual. Unconcerned with whether the weather offended you. Driving home alone is not reasonable. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. The frustrating thing was that he was not wrong. Failed suppressants at this level were not a minor inconvenience. They were a safety issue, the kind that got Omegas into situations that ended with police reports and trauma that took years to work through. I knew this. I had literally written a 40-page literature review on this. I hated knowing this right now. "There is a guest room," Daehyun said from his chair by the window. He had not moved, still holding Seo-jun, who had drifted into that heavy, boneless sleep that babies did after a bottle, limbs completely surrendered to gravity. "Two of them. You can take one and set up the other for Seo-jun. We have a portable crib somewhere. Siwon ordered it 2 days ago." I turned to look at Siwon very slowly. Siwon met my gaze without flinching. "I ordered it after the lawyer contacted us." "The lawyer contacted you," I said. "3 days ago. Mire's estate. They informed us of Seo-jun's existence and told us the details would be hand-delivered." He paused. "We assumed it would be a legal representative." "Surprise," I said flatly. "It was just me in a diaper bag." "We noticed," Jihoon said. I looked around the kitchen, at the three of them, at Seo-jun asleep and entirely at peace against Daehyun's chest, at the Seattle skyline doing its indifferent glittering outside the windows, and I conducted a very rapid and honest internal audit of my options. Go home alone with compromised suppressants and a baby through 3 active pack territories at 3 in the morning, or stay in a penthouse with 3 alphas, who had so far been unexpectedly reasonable and who had apparently bought a crib in anticipation of this moment. I wanted to choose option 1 purely on principle. My brain, unfortunately, had a self-preservation function that was currently overriding my pride with extreme prejudice. "I need to see the guest room first," I said. "I am not agreeing to anything I have not visually confirmed exists." Jihoon pushed off the island and crossed the kitchen without a word, clearly expecting me to follow. I followed because the alternative was standing in the kitchen arguing with my own common sense. He led me down a hallway off the main living space, past a closed door that radiated that same layered cedar and storm scent so strongly it had to be their shared sleeping space, and stopped at a door near the end. He pushed it open and stepped back. I looked inside. It was a large room with a window seat running the length of the far wall, a bed that looked aggressively comfortable, and lighting warm enough that the whole space felt like something you could actually exhale in. Clean, simple. Nothing performative about it. It smelled faintly of cedar, but lighter here, like the scent was carried on the air, rather than lived into the walls. "The other room is adjacent," Jihoon said from behind me. "Seo-jun would be close enough that you would hear him." I stepped inside slowly, ran one hand along the window seat, looked out at the water, dark and wide, and strung with bridge lights, and felt something in my chest do something I did not have the energy to name or address at this particular moment. "You built a nursery," I said, "in 3 days. We ordered a crib," he said. "It is flat-packed in the closet. We did not know what else to prepare for." I turned to look at him. He was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed loosely, watching me the way he watched everything, like he was reading something written in a language he had been fluent in for a long time. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Yes. The 3 of you found out 3 days ago that your best friend, your whatever she was to you, had passed and left behind a child. And your first move was to order a crib." He held my gaze. "What else would we do?" It was such a straightforward answer. No performance in it. No bid for credit. Just the quiet logic of 3 men who, when handed an impossible situation, went immediately to what does this child need? Something behind my sternum shifted in a way that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with something much more dangerous. I looked away first. "Fine," I said. "We are staying, but I have conditions." "Tell me your conditions," Jihoon said. The way he said it, patient and direct and genuinely willing to hear them, was somehow the most disarming thing that had happened all night. And tonight had included a lot of competition. I laid out my conditions with the calm efficiency of someone who had spent 3 weeks making impossible decisions and had stopped being embarrassed about having needs. 1. Nobody enters my room without knocking and receiving a verbal yes. Not to check on me, not to bring anything, not for any reason. 2. The scent situation is a medical issue and it will be treated as one. Nobody makes it weird. 3. I make the calls on Seo-jun. I have been his primary caregiver since Mirai passed, and until there is a legal arrangement in place, That does not change overnight just because we are in your space. Ji-hoon had listened to all three without interrupting. Agreed, he said. Just like that. No negotiation, no counter, no subtle alpha posturing about whose territory we were standing in. Just agreed, like my conditions were reasonable, which they were. But I had been braced for someone to make it complicated anyway. I looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. You are either very reasonable or very strategic. Both, he said. Then he turned and walked back toward the kitchen. And I stood there for a second in the guest room doorway, processing the fact that the most high-stakes conversation I had expected tonight had just resolved itself in under 4 minutes. By the time I followed him back to the kitchen, Siwan had located the flat-packed crib box from somewhere and was reading the assembly instructions with the focused expression of a man who had built corporate empires and was now applying that same energy to a piece of furniture with 37 components and instructions written in 7 languages. I can do that, I said. I have it, he said without looking up. The instructions are upside down, I said. He rotated them. Said nothing. Kept reading. Dae-hyun was still in the chair with Seo-jun, who had not stirred. He looked up when I came back in, and something in his face asked a question he did not put into words. We are staying, I said quietly. Just tonight. He nodded. Looked back down at the baby. His thumb moved in a small, slow arc across Seo-jun's back, and I noticed it was the same rhythm I used when Seo-jun was fussy, that specific 3-beat pattern that settled him. Dae-hyun had been doing it for the last hour. He had not been taught it. He found it on his own. I sat down at the island across from Siwan and his crib instructions, and tried to remember the last time I had sat down without a baby in my arms, or a task pressing against the back of my skull. I could not remember. It had been more than 3 weeks. The kitchen was warm. The city outside was doing its quiet 3 a.m. thing. That specific stillness that was not actually silent but felt like it. Saiwan was reading. Dae-hyun was holding the baby. Ji-hoon had poured a glass of water and set it on the island in front of me without announcing it, which I did not notice until I looked down and found it there. I picked it up and drank half of it, because apparently my body had been waiting for someone to remind it that water was an option. Mireille, Dae-hyun said softly. Not a question. Just her name, placed carefully in the space between us like something he had been holding and needed to set down. She was my person, I said. My voice stayed even. I had gotten good at even. Since we were 19, we met in a campus laundry room at 11 at night, arguing over who had called the last dryer. She said it was hers. It was not. I have never told her she was right, and I am not starting now that she is gone. Dae-hyun's mouth moved. Grief and something warmer mixed together in his expression. She sent me voice memos, he said, after Chicago, 3 of them over the next month. Then they stopped. He paused. I responded to all 3. She never replied. The kitchen went very quiet. I closed my eyes for exactly 1 second, because I knew exactly what that was. I knew Mireille's voice memo phase, the way she processed things she could not say face to face by recording herself saying them into a phone instead. She had sent me 47 of them over the years. I still had every single one. She had sent this man 3 and then disappeared because she had found out she was pregnant and made a unilateral decision about what his life needed, which was the most Mireille thing she had ever done, and also the thing I had been quietly furious at her about for 3 weeks. She thought she was protecting you, I said. That was always how she hurt people. With protection. She decided what you could handle and then arranged the world accordingly without asking if you wanted a say. Dae-hyun absorbed that slowly. I would have wanted a say. I know, I said. She should have let you have one. From down the hall, a small sound drifted through the apartment. Not crying. The particular kind of restless noise Seo-jun made when he had rolled himself into an uncomfortable position in his sleep and needed a hand to settle him before it escalated. I started to stand. Dae-hyun was already moving, transferring the sleeping baby to Ji-hoon, who had appeared at his shoulder with the seamless coordination of people who had shared a physical space their whole lives. Dae-hyun looked at me. I will go, he said. You do not know his settling pattern, I said. Then come show me. It was not a challenge. It was not flirtatious. It was just a man who wanted to learn how to take care of a child, who was his, asking the person who knew how. I looked at him for a moment. Then I got up and walked with him down the hallway toward the room where we had set up the crib. and I tried very hard not to notice that his scent followed me like a second shadow, cedar and something warmer underneath, something that my battered, grieving, thoroughly exhausted Omega biology had apparently decided felt exactly like safety. I noticed anyway. I was going to need stronger suppressants. The nursery was dim and warm, the only light coming from the hallway spilling in through the half-open door. Seo Jun was on his back in the crib, not fully awake but not settled either, his small fists curled against his chest, his face doing that scrunched, concentrated thing that meant he was 30 seconds from deciding whether tonight was a crying night or a go-back-to-sleep night. I had learned to read that face like a weather forecast. "Do not pick him up yet," I said quietly, stopping at the crib rail beside Daehyun. "If you pick him up the moment he stirs, he learns that stirring gets him picked up. Then you are holding him every 40 minutes until sunrise, and your back files a formal complaint." Daehyun looked at me sideways. 40 minutes. "Tuesday night," I said. "I do not want to talk about it." He looked back at Seo Jun. "So, what do we do?" "Put your hand on his stomach. Flat, gentle. Just enough weight that he can feel you are there. Then wait." Daehyun reached into the crib carefully, his large hand settling over Seo Jun's middle with a steadiness that I noted was completely instinctive. No hesitation, no awkwardness. Just a man making himself present in the most physical and uncomplicated way possible. Seo Jun's face smoothed out almost immediately. The scrunched concentration dissolved into the slack softness of a baby, deciding that sleep was the better option after all. His breathing deepened, his fists uncurled, his whole small body settled like a sigh made visible. Daehyun did not move his hand for another full minute. I stood beside him in the quiet and tried to remember why I had been so tense all evening. Because standing here in this dim room, next to this man, while Mirei's son went peacefully back to sleep, the tension had gone somewhere I could not immediately locate. That was not better. That was actually more concerning. "You can take your hand back now," I said. He did, slowly, like he was reluctant to break the contact. He straightened and looked at Seo Jun for a long moment, and his expression in the half-dark was open in a way I suspected he would not have allowed in a brighter room. "He has her nose," Daehyun said. My throat tightened. "He has her stubbornness, too. You will learn that one in the morning, when he has opinions about which bowl his food comes in." A breath moved through Daehyun that was almost a laugh. She had opinions about bowls. She had opinions about everything, I said, in extraordinary detail, including bowls, thread count, the correct way to load a dishwasher, and whether people who recline their seats on short flights are fundamentally untrustworthy. "They are," Daehyun said. "That is exactly what she said." We stood there with that sitting between us, that specific bittersweet weight of two people, discovering they loved the same person from different angles. It was not comfortable exactly, but it was honest. And right now, honest was the only currency I had enough of to spend. Daehyun turned to lean his back against the crib rail, facing the room rather than the baby, his arms crossed loosely. He was close enough that I could feel the warmth of him in the cool air of the nursery. "You are exhausted," he said. Not accusing, just observing with the directness that seemed to be a family trait. "I am fine." "You have been fine all evening," he said, very loudly fine. In the specific way, people are fine when they have not been fine in a long time and have forgotten what the alternative feels like. I looked at him. He looked back, patient and unhurried, and I had the distinct and uncomfortable experience of feeling seen by someone I had known for approximately 2 hours. "I am a behavioral neuroscientist," I said. "I am aware of my own coping mechanisms. Being aware of them is not the same as not needing them." I had no immediate response to that, which was inconvenient because I usually had an immediate response to everything. "Hajun." His voice was quiet and even, and it had no business landing the way it did. "She trusted you with the most important thing in her life. That is not a small weight to carry alone for 3 weeks. Something cracked at the back of my eyes. Tiny. Manageable. I was not going to cry in front of this man in this nursery at 3 in the morning. I had made that decision, and I was committed to it. "She should have told you," I said. My voice stayed level through what I considered a heroic effort. "All 3 of you. She should have called you from Chicago, and she should have told you the moment she knew. And she did not, and I am angry at her for that. I have been angry at her for it since I read that letter. And I also know that she was scared and she was proud and she thought she was doing the right thing. And holding both of those things at the same time is. I stopped. Exhausting, Daehyun said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he uncrossed his arms and turned back toward the door, pausing beside me, not touching. Just close enough that his scent was warm and immediate, and doing absolutely nothing helpful to my nervous system. Get some sleep, he said. We will figure out the rest in the morning. All of it. That is a very optimistic timeline, I said. I am a very optimistic person. I looked at him fully. He did not look like a particularly optimistic person. He looked like a man who had learned to be steady, because the world rewarded steadiness, and had quietly decided that was close enough. Good night, Daehyun, I said. Good night, Hajun. He left. I stood in the nursery doorway and listened to his footsteps go quiet down the hall, and told myself very firmly that the warmth sitting in my chest was gratitude, and proximity, and grief, doing what grief did to the body's chemistry. Seo-jun sighed in his sleep. I looked at him, this baby who had just spent his first night breathing the same air as his father's, and I thought, Mireille, you absolute disaster of a person. You planned all of this. The terrifying part was that it was working. I woke up to sunlight and the sound of someone laughing. Not politely, not quietly. The real kind, sudden and unguarded, the kind that escapes before a person can decide whether to let it out. It came from down the hall and it was followed immediately by a second voice, lower, trying and failing to suppress its own version of the same thing. I lay still for a moment, blinking at the ceiling of a room that was not mine, in a penthouse that was not mine, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like cedar and warm rain, and conducted a brief inventory of my emotional state. Surprisingly not terrible. Suspicious. I got up, found my hoodie, and followed the sound down the hallway to the kitchen. Seo-jun was in a high chair that had not existed last night. A proper one, white and solid, pulled up to the kitchen island like it had always lived there. He had a piece of banana in each fist and was systematically destroying both, while making a sound that could only be described as triumphant. He was also wearing a bib that said, Big Opinions, Small Human, which I had definitely not packed. Daehyun was at the stove. Saiwon was at the island with his laptop and a coffee, watching Seo-jun with the expression of a man who had expected chaos and was finding it more tolerable than anticipated. Ji-hoon was standing next to the high chair, holding a piece of banana at the exact angle Seo-jun was demanding it, receiving instruction from an 8-month-old without any visible resentment. I stood in the kitchen doorway and took all of this in. He has been directing that for 10 minutes, Siwon said, without looking up from his laptop. The banana placement is apparently very specific. It has to be in his left hand first, I said, then his right. If you do it out of order, he will look at you like you have personally disappointed him. Ji-hoon looked at me, then at the banana, then back at me with an expression that said he had in fact done it out of order and had in fact received the look. I tried to tell him, Daehyun said from the stove. Nobody told me, Ji-hoon said. It was implied, Daehyun said. How was that implied? It is always left first with him. You can see it in how he reaches. I walked to the coffee maker because this conversation was going to continue without my input, and the coffee smelled extraordinary. I poured a cup, turned around, and found all three of them looking at me with varying degrees of something that was not quite casual. Good morning, I said. Good morning, Daehyun said. There is food. Sit down. I can make my own. I already made yours. Sit down, Hajun. I sat down because he was using the voice that did not leave a lot of room for argument, and also because there was a plate of food appearing in front of me that smelled like someone had put genuine effort into it. I looked at it, then up at Daehyun. You cooked. I cook every morning. For 3 people. Today for 4. He held my gaze for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, then went back to the stove with the calm efficiency of a man who had said what he meant and did not feel the need to underline it. Something warm moved through my chest, and I addressed it firmly by eating a piece of egg. Seo-jun, from his high chair, looked at me with banana on his chin and both fists raised like he had won something. Yes, I told him. Very impressive. He shrieked with satisfaction. Swan closed his laptop. He looked at me across the island with that precise, measured gaze and said, We would like to discuss arrangement, if you are willing to hear it. I am eating, I said. After you finish eating. I eat slowly. I have noticed. But his mouth moved slightly at the corner. Take your time. I did take my time. I ate all of it, which was the first full meal I had finished in 3 weeks without interruption. Because every time Seo-jun started building toward a complaint, one of the three of them redirected him with the focused teamwork of people who had been dividing tasks between them since birth. When I put my fork down, Siwon folded his hands on the island and looked at me steadily. We want Seo-jun in our lives, fully. Not visits, not scheduled arrangements. We want to raise him. He paused. And we would like you to stay. Not as a caregiver we are employing. As someone who belongs here. Because you were Mirai's person, and that means you are already Seo-jun's person. And the last 12 hours suggest you might be. He stopped. Looked briefly at his brothers, then back at me. Ours, if you wanted to be. The kitchen was very quiet. Seo-jun dropped a piece of banana on the floor and looked at it philosophically. I looked at Siwon, then at Jihoon, who was watching me with that patient, dark attention. Then at Daehyun, who was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed and his eyes on me, and whose expression said he had already decided, but was giving me every space in the world to decide for myself. That is a large thing to say to someone you met 12 hours ago, I said. Yes, Siwon agreed. You are all insane. Possibly, Jihoon said. My suppressants are still broken. We are aware, Daehyun said. That is not why we are asking. I looked at Seo-jun. He looked back at me with Mirai's eyes, bright and completely unbothered. Banana on his chin, both his father's and his almost father's in the same kitchen. The morning light coming in off the water, turning everything gold. Mirai, I thought. You chaotic, brilliant, impossible person. You knew exactly what you were doing. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, set it down. I have conditions, I said. Daehyun smiled. Actually smiled, full and unhurried, and it rearranged his entire face into something that made my heart do something I was done arguing with. We know, he said. Tell us your conditions. So I did. And outside the window, Seattle sparkled over the water, and Seo-jun threw his last piece of banana at Jihoon with excellent aim, and somewhere I could not locate, but could absolutely feel, I think Mirai was laughing. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even wilder and more intriguing than you can imagine, so be sure to check it out and hit subscribe. The next story drops soon.